Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Mr. Farney Earth Science video. We have made it to the final section in our geologic time unit, the Phanerozoic Eon, where we're going to discuss some key components to the Paleozoic, Mesozoic, and Cenozoic eras. There's a lot of information about to come at you about these last 500 million years, but the things that you want to try to just be aware of is have an understanding of which events occurred during each of these eras and being able to kind of put them in a sequence in your head. That way, if, let's say, on a test or a quiz or an activity, I ask you when certain events happen, you should be able to figure out, well, I know that this event happened in this period of time because it came before, let's say, the dinosaurs or something like that, or after the dinosaurs. So however you want to try to organize it in your head, that's a really good, easy way of trying to do that. Additionally, one of the key things about these different eras is that there's a lot of mass extinction events that occur throughout them. Now, if we go all the way back and we think about ecology, and we think about how ecosystems are structured and set up, each individual organism plays a very specific role or niche in that environment, in that ecosystem. When these mass extinction events occur, large gaps happen because large numbers of organisms die out. These niches open up, which are then filled by different organisms. So these mass extinction events, while they are traumatic on the surface, they gave rise to everything that came after. So I believe we're going to talk or mention about 2 or 3 different mass extinction events, and I'll try to point out that, hey, when this event occurred, XYZ organisms died out, ABC organisms came in and took their place, which has kind of kept the evolution of the planet going as a whole. So again, the 2 things you want to try to be aware of is the sequence in which different events have occurred, where they happen, and just knowing that these mass extinction events, while traumatic to the planet, did give rise to different organisms taking over and filling those niche spaces. So let's dive right into it. The Paleozoic era, the first era of the Phanerozoic Eon. Remember, one of the things you want to try to keep straight in your head are the difference in time scales between eons and eras and periods and epochs and all that fun stuff. So here we are, the Paleozoic era. This is the period of time where we had the large majority of complex life explode onto the planet and the formation of Pangea. So a lot of stuff going on in this. We can't talk about the Paleozoic era without talking about the Cambrian explosion. So the first period of time, the Cambrian, this is where we have large amounts of multicellular life beginning to fill the ocean. Remember, the Precambrian, everything that came before the Cambrian, that was the Hadean period, the Archean period, the Proterozoic period. All of that was dominated by single cell organisms. When we shifted from the Precambrian to the Cambrian, that was the hard cutoff for, we go from single cell organisms to now having all of this different multicellular life beginning to dominate the planet. So this Cambrian explosion wasn't an explosion like a bomb going off or something like that. It was an explosion of life, an explosion of diversity amongst marine organisms in the ocean. And we have evidence of this because we have certain fossils found in rocks all over the planet that we can use as an index for this period of time. And that's the little trilobite dudes that we see in the picture here, or in these fossils found in different parts of the past slide said, the Burgess Shale in Canada, and in parts of Western China, we have a lot of these different trilobite fossils being able to found in rocks dated all the way back to the Cambrian. So that's how we know the dominant species of this planet was the trilobite. Rocks older than this have nothing in it. Whole lot of nothing, except a couple bands of BIFs from those cyanobacteria that we were talking about before. So the rocks before this have almost no fossils in it. And then all of a sudden we have all these trilobites popping up. So that's the real big indicator that, hey, we have this explosion of life that's occurring across the planet. Moving on to the next period, the Ordovician, still strong with animals that have hard parts like shells, but we have the development of different types of snails and gastropods and things like that. We have our first mass extinction event on the planet where there was some sort of ice age that caused the sea level to drop. I believe it was by at least 80 feet. Now, This killed off half the organisms on the planet, which makes sense. Trilobites and things like that, they're found on the bottom of our oceans, on the seafloor, but they don't go very deep. They have to stay in that layer of water where there's a lot of sunlight and a lot of plants that are able to grow and things like that. Because remember, the organisms haven't become too diverse to be able to go deep under the ocean yet. That's going to be a little bit. So most of these are along kind of that shoreline where the breakers hit and a little farther out, which sometimes scientists refer to as the sunlight zone or the epipelagic zone. You don't need to worry about that. Just know that when that ocean level dropped because of this ice age, so did the number of trilobites, gastropods, and things like that. Half of those organisms went extinct. But when an extinction happens, we have organisms being able to begin to kind of come in and fill that niche, of which in the Silurian, after the ice age kind of calmed down a little bit, warmed up a little bit the planet, we have coral reefs, our oldest coral reefs forming. Now, if we get to talking about oceans a little bit more in the spring, we'll learn that coral reefs need a specific ocean temperature and pH range in order for them to be able to survive in those specific underwater conditions. So the ocean pH and water temperature had to be at a certain point for these coral reefs to begin forming. Also, a huge thing that happened in the Silurian was plants colonizing the land. We remember back to ecology, the important role that plants or producers play in a system is that we cannot have an ecosystem, we cannot have a food chain or a food web without our producers, without our plants. If we remember the trophic energy pyramid, the very bottom tier were producers. They hold up the rest of the pyramid. So without producers, we wouldn't be able to have our primary, our secondary, or our tertiary consumers being able to, begin to fill out the rest of the system. We need plants first. So it was the plants that made the jump to land first. Then after they had established enough of a baseline, then different animal organisms began coming in out of the water after it. That happened during our Devonian period here. Even though it's called the age of fish, we had land plants exploding in a variety of numbers. We have many different vertebrates, some tetrapods being able to form, but we also have the emergence of our first insects and amphibians that would eventually, evolve to the dinosaurs and then hang around and be modern day reptiles. So our amphibians, they started in the Devonian during this age of fish. So a lot of stuff coming at you, I know. We get to the Carboniferous. This is called the age of cockroaches because they were massive bugs during this period of time. We had insects that were similar to modern day dragonflies with wingspans over 1 meter or 3 feet long. Huge. This is also the period of time where we have coal forming. A lot of the coal that we use today come from the Mississippian and Pennsylvanian periods, kind of grouped together, referred to as the Carboniferous, because there's a carbon is the primary element in coal. So we call it the Carboniferous because it's where we formed most coal that we use today. So really cool Carboniferous, age of cockroaches, giant bugs and dragonflies. Like we have this really cool dragonfly mold fossil here on the left. That just kind of shows the overall size and scope of this. So if I were to put a meter stick up to that wingspan is about 3 feet long going from side to side there. So huge bugs during the Carboniferous periods. We get to the Permian, and the Permian is so key. We have the Pangea finally coming together and forming. But then somewhere around 250 million years ago, the largest mass extinction event in Earth's history occurred. Now, it's up to debate on what was going on with this extinction event. The leading hypothesis is there were large volcano eruptions that lasted about 5 to 8 million years that pumped so much carbon into the atmosphere that it rose global temperatures by 18 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, this amount of eruption and things like that caused 95% of marine life forms to go extinct because our air temperature goes up, so does our ocean temperature. And we need that ocean temperature and pH to be so specific in order for things to survive that it changed so much that only 5% of marine life was able to survive. Additionally, on the land, 65% of amphibians went extinct, 66% of insects went extinct. We waved goodbye to our trilobites that lasted through the entire Paleozoic. Whew, so much happened. Those trilobites had a 400 million year run. That's insane. That's impressive for a species to survive that long. But when we have this much dying off because of an extinction event, so many new organisms, so many new roles, so many new niches open up that allow new species to evolve, to develop, and fill in those gaps. So as we wave goodbye to the Paleozoic and we go into the Mesozoic, our reptile friends become the dominant land animals during this time, while Pangea slowly began breaking apart. So we had the PT mass extinction event, the Permian Triassic. Pangea slowly starts to begin breaking apart. We have the appearance of our first dinosaurs and mammals appearing. So they kind of live side by side, dinosaurs and mammals, but it was the reptiles that dominated the entire era of the Mesozoic. We get to the Jurassic period. Our dinosaurs began kind of shifting a little bit from being very reptile looking to birds. So we have the first birds coming out in this period of time. We had these massive coniferous forests dominating all over the place. And a fun little aside, if you've seen the movie Jurassic Park, is that most of the dinosaurs featured in the Jurassic Park, like the Tyrannosaurus Rex and things like that, they're not from the Jurassic period. They're from the next period of time, the Cretaceous. But I guess, you know, James Cameron thought Jurassic Park sounded a lot cooler than Cretaceous Park, so he just went with Jurassic Park. So just a fun aside, most of the dinosaurs are from the Cretaceous. Here we are, Cretaceous, the T-Rex. We know the T-Rex, Triceratops. I like this little fun fact here that ants first appeared during the Cretaceous. They've been around for a while. Flowering plants first appeared on the planet. And then here we go, big old meteorite. There go the dinosaurs. About 65 million years ago, 66 million years ago, depending who you talk to, a big old meteor struck the planet. We know this because there's a massive impact crater off the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. A couple other small pieces of evidence too, using the fossil record. When the dinosaurs, began dying out around 65 million years or so, because we had that big die out. Remember earlier on how we said the reptiles and the mammals were living together? Well, now that a lot of the reptiles have died out, goodbye T-Rex, goodbye Triceratops, farewell Mesozoic. It gave rise in the Cenozoic to the mammals to become the dominant organisms on the surface of the planet, while the continents continued shifting away from Pangea to the current orientation that we see today. So the first period, the Tertiary period, we have the rise of mammals, and mammals are great because we need to be able to adapt to both warm and cold climates, which the planet is slowly shifting toward, having areas that are warm, areas that are cold, very seasonal because of the reorganization of those continents. So the Tertiary period was very important for that. We skip ahead to the Quaternary period. It contains two epochs, the Pleistocene and the Holocene. We live at the kind of the most recent part of the Holocene right now. Pleistocene was important because that's when we had the Ice Age, or whenever we talk about the Ice Age, this is the one we're talking about, where woolly mammoths became dominant, large cats became dominant as well. But near the end of the Pleistocene, where the Ice Age began, becoming not so icy, those large organisms, those megafauna, began dying out, which then, opened the niche for modern human to come into play around 50,000 years ago. And that's it. That's the Phanerozoic. Whole bunch of stuff going on in there. Really cool chunk of Earth's history, that 500 million year time, the last 10%. So much happened in the last 10%. It's absurd. So what do you need to try to remember is just to try to remember the different eras, Paleozoic, Mesozoic, Cenozoic, and then just try to keep in mind what was going on when. Paleozoic was dominated a lot early on by the organisms in the ocean. Plants populated the land. We had coral reefs coming into play, the age of insects. We had the different Carboniferous periods where carbon formed. The Permian happened where we had Pangea come together. Mass extinction event. Reptiles came into play during the Mesozoic. Meteorite hit. mammals took over during the Cenozoic all the way up until modern day where you and I live right there at the end of the Holocene. So this ends our trip through geologic time. If you have any questions for me, please go ahead, reach out. If not, have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care.